Hey everyone, my name is Michael Swaim and welcome to another episode of News, Games, and More, IGN's daily live news show. Although we are today technically not a part of a Summer of Games stream, we are still supporting our two great charities, so make sure you keep those donations coming. Again, that is first and foremost not foremost, we're supporting both equally, but we've got the Bail Project, which provides bail for families in need and restores the presumption of innocence in support of Black Lives Matter. And we're also supporting the World Health Organization's COVID-19 Response Fund, which is dedicated to studying and combating the COVID-19 pandemic, as you might expect. You can give to either cause and earn a chance to win some very cool prizes by following the links down in the video description or heading to donate.ign.com. But other than that, today is a regular News, Games, and More, so let's get down to it. I am here with Matt Kim, Tom Marks, Jonathan Dornbush, R2D2, and an adorable dog. Welcome, everyone.
Amazing reveal.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Dorno, you've just gone down in the credits, in the billing.
That's fair. That's absolutely fair.
I trust everyone's doing well. There's a lot of news today. Honestly, it's a stacked day, so let's just get into it. First, our headline story is The Last of Us 2 already breaking sales records, having sold 4 million copies as of June 21st. That's 4 days, right? 3 days? I'm not sure. The window in there, but
3 total, I think.
Yeah, it came out the 19th.
Gotcha. So, okay. Well, what do we know about this other than the fact itself? I believe it. What did it topple, first of all? Do we know previous to that?
Well, it's pretty much the fastest selling first party PS4 exclusive. So God of War, Uncharted 4, Spider-Man, I believe, even though it wasn't first party at the time, now Insomniac is, but it was a exclusive game. I believe that sold 3.3 million in its first few days. So yeah, it pretty much toppled every other PS4 first party exclusive.
Horizon
yeah, and
Zero
it's been
Dawn, you name it.
Yeah.
It's been getting rave reviews all around, including from IGN. This is remarkable. Is it unexpected? And I also wanted to ask the panel, how does this sort of compare and contrast with the story we ran a couple days ago, where Sony ex-boss was talking about whether AAA games are sustainable? Does this speak to that? Because this AAA game certainly seems like it's going to make its money back. How does that affect the AAA marketplace generally? Tom, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so first of all, this is a surprise to me. It wasn't a surprise to me that it was going to do well. I just didn't think it would blow everything out of the water this way. 4 million in 3 days is extraordinary. And when you look at what it beat, right, with the last PS4 exclusive, that it beating Marvel Spider-Man to this record is a sequel of a new IP beat out a Marvel game. That is a wild thing to me. And I mean, I knew this game was going to do well, but yeah, I'm very, very surprised that it really exploded like this. Generally, I don't know, maybe do you guys, am I alone there? Or is this just me being dumbfounded in the corner?
Yeah, what do you think? Dorno.
I don't think you're wrong to be surprised. I am not personally surprised, but that's also because I have a weird obsession with following game sales.
Fair enough.
And so, for my love of following box office results for no reason other than it's interesting to me. But with game sales and stuff, like the first Last of Us, as strange as it is a huge seller on the PS4 because it came, in the last year of the PS3's life cycle, and the PS4 has obviously been a much bigger sales success over the course of its life than the PS3 was out the gate. And so The Last of Us was an early frequent, it was on the PS3, but if you're buying a PS4 and maybe you missed out on the PS3, this is the game you have to play. So many people were told at the beginning of this generation. And so The Last of Us, the original one, I think combined PS3 and PS4 has sold at least over 17 million copies. And, it's one of the most critically acclaimed PlayStation exclusives of all time, easily the most beloved PS3 exclusive. Like there was so much going into this on, I think, a level that transcends for lack of a better term, the bubble of us talking about this game online. Like The Last of Us is an extremely well-known, larger property. And so I think that definitely helps it in this case.
And yet there was some speculation, of course, because of the controversy around the plot leaks, that would hurt sales in some impactful way. Matt, how about you? Were you surprised by this, or this is basically what you expected? Did you expect it to be a huge hit?
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised to see some of the numbers of the games that it beat out, only because I kind of thought Spider-Man would do better. But no, I didn't think The Last of Us Part 2 was gonna not do less than amazing sales-wise, only considering because The Last of Us 1 was, a game of the generation for many people, and so the sequel is one of the most highly anticipated games for apparently many more people.
Right.
And and it's snowballed, right? Like people hear about this game from their friends, and even if they never played the first one, they hear that this is some sort of achievement that's gonna, the end of a generation kind of game, and they pick it out anyways, you know.
And I think
Well,
people are finally reaching the end of their Animal Crossing end game.
Mm.
Some people, and I do wonder if it just is generally benefiting from shelter-in-place orders and things like that. I'm sure it must be in some way that can't be fully quantified. Tom, you were going to say.
I mean, who doesn't want to play a post-apocalyptic virus zombie game during a pandemic? That just seems like a perfect fit. No, I was going to say that, Swaim, you brought it up a little bit already, and kind of we talking around it, this idea of like, how much is the controversy actually going to affect sales? And like, it's really easy. But the bubble, the word you use, Jonathan, is a really good word for it, because it's really easy to kind of get wrapped up in games talk, myself included, where you just sort of like are so focused on like what the conversation is online, you forget that like the vast majority of people who play and buy games are not reading about them obsessively online, or not following the controversies. Many of them probably aren't even watching the trailers, that sort of thing. Like it's really not as big of a reach as it appears when you're sort of ingrained in that culture, like we are, and like people watching this show are. But like a good example of this for me, like a good way to illustrate it in my mind, is if you just read Reddit and online discourse, right, to get a sense of what the public thinks of a game. And I'm not hating on that. I'm saying if you just did that for the last decade, let's say, you would think that Call of Duty was the worst selling game of all time, right? Because every year people hate on Call of Duty. Every year people say it's the same game, it's bad, they're rehashing it. And that's sort of fallen off a little bit in recent years in terms of that sort of angle of the discourse. But like every year, Call of Duty is the best-selling game of the year, no matter how much people hate on it, right? Whether that hate is deserved or not, it does not matter. People hating on a game online will never, or very rarely, I should say, actually affect the sales of that video game to a wider audience.
Gotcha. Yeah, I agree completely. I do want to move us on to the next segment, but real quick before we leave The Last of Us Part 2, completely spoiler-free, of course, who here has completed The Last of Us Part 2? Anyone? Or is playing?
I've never played it. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Get out of here.
You'll have to read all 3,200 words of my review to find out what
Yeah, we'll see. So So we know what Jonathan thinks, but I just want to throw my hat in the ring officially on record as also like, I think the sales are deserved. I enjoyed it immensely. Matt?
Yeah, I had a good time. I had a great time, even.
Yeah, I had a great,
Yeah.
awful time. Yeah.
I had a great, awful time. I don't know. Honestly, I didn't think the game was as misery porn as some of the other reviews outside have suggested. I actually thought
It's
that the
getting a
message
bit
was
of
quite
that.
hopeful.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
uh,
Well, we could talk about that for hours, but that's not the purview of this show. So
yeah.
I also wanted to talk about our other headline story, or it wouldn't be News Games Plus. Square Enix seemingly, well, pretty confirmedly, but it's not a public-facing announcement. It came from, I believe, a stockholders meeting. Has a slew of new games coming, and so we get to wildly speculate on what those might be and when we might get our hands on them. Yeah, so what do we know about this in detail? Anyone who was on the story or has the
I can
doc in
jump
front of
in
them?
as
Please.
our resident news editor, though
Editorial.
Matt, as
Yeah,
our reporter,
absolutely.
could also say. Basically, there was a company stockholder meeting, and during it, I have the quote up. They said, "quote We would normally announce a new game or new games at E3. Yes, we had planned to have a press conference as a replacement event, but we're unable to do so since assets were not complete. We'll be announcing new titles individually as timing permits. Several will debut around July to August."
Mm-hmm.
So it's
So do
basically
we? Yeah,
them
go
coming
ahead.
out and saying what like Microsoft has said and what Nintendo has said already, which is, yeah, we would have done the E3 thing, but we just didn't, and so it's coming later. Like is the short and long of it.
That's true, but it's still an invitation for shows like ours to speculate on what that slate might be.
Oh, I'm
And
not trying to get into
yeah,
speculation. Believe me.
absolutely. I'm just assuming, well, a commenter said it at IGN.com. M. Thomas 73177. I'd be willing to bet the next chapter of FF7 Remake will be one, which might seem a little accelerated, but it seems like that's the way that series should go. And it's interesting because we saw Capcom come out with RE3 Remake very, by like historical standards, quickly after RE2 Remake. Do we think that's the way Square Enix is going to go with that? Like, is the bulk of this going to be leaning into the success of? I also even don't know sales on FF7 Remake, but I assume it did great. I assume it
It did. It
killed.
was the number
Okay.
one selling game its month, and it did very well. So for me, they have had quotes that essentially said they are looking to, I think, have a more expedited release schedule than the reveal of FF7 Remake so many years ago to its launch. Not to like totally burst the bubble of wanting Remake Part 2 to show up, but
Mm-hmm.
they've talked about there being a year-long exclusivity for it on PS4, and then not really talking about what comes after that. I wouldn't be shocked if one of the announcements is whatever Remake looks like on other platforms, as not exciting as that is comparatively to Remake Part 2. I wouldn't be shocked if they start talking about that soon.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's not a terrible instinct, I think.
Yeah.
But I also, the like fanboy in me wants to hope that they would have at least teased something, right? Like just done like a teaser trailer of like
Mm.
anything, like
Mm-hmm.
just to because that's the message that's missing right now. Is yeah, you're totally right that they've got to come out on other platforms. Like I don't think we're gonna get Remake Part 2 or Number 2 or whatever it's called in the next year by any means, but I think that the thing that's missing is any information right now, and people probably just want to hear like, yeah, it literally still exists, here's a logo or something like that.
I would be
All,
down
all,
for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, all credit to Max Scoville. I think he and Brian have said this a lot on Podcast Beyond in particular, but like right now, because we are at that point where we're waiting for the next generation, this is the point where it's like legally allowed for you to just say, here's a logo, it's coming in 3 years, and we're okay with that because we know the next gen is such a work in progress and things are going to be coming, far down the road. Whereas if they do that in the middle of a console gen, we're less likely to be receptive to that.
There is a
Yeah.
window for that. I've already heard of Night City wire fatigue, which I never thought I'd hear any kind of cyberpunk fatigue. So you can only go so far with the hype train. Matt, do you have any predictions or like heartfelt desires. One of our commenters, Tame Empanada, said, "Can we finally get a new Final Fantasy Tactics, please?" I doubt it, but that appealed to me very much. I was like, "Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be great."
Uh,
Anything call out to
I
you?
I'm not a huge Final Fantasy guy, so
Mm.
like I still even haven't played the remake. I Square Enix has a lot of projects in the wings that I'm not I'd say more interested in, but like they have the Nier remake from the original Nier expanded remake that they announced in Japan only that they haven't talked about a lot in Western press that I'm super interested in. There was that game Babylon's Fall with Platinum Games they announced at last E3 that we just have not seen at all for over a year. Square Enix can do a lot, especially if there's not going to be like a Square Enix show or anything like that planned, and if they're just gonna like that Kingdom Hearts rhythm game that they just sort of stealth announced with the trailer. Like I can imagine them doing a lot of that between the next couple of months of just being like, here's a Babylon's Fall update, just randomly appears on YouTube at like 6 a.m.
Yeah, I might have had my head in the stream at that time. Can someone just like TLDR me? What is that Kingdom Hearts rhythm game? We just ran some B-roll of it in case other
Oh
people missed it
well,
like me.
let me fill you in.
Jonathan, please.
It is it's a rhythm game. It's a Kingdom Hearts rhythm game that takes the soundtracks from all the various games, and the soundtracks have been like, there's a lot of debate about some of the side games of Kingdom Hearts stand up to the mainline ones. The soundtracks are always uniformly phenomenal in my opinion. So this basically is a rhythm based sort of combat game running you through the whole series. I'm really excited because I loved Theat Rhythm, which was a Final Fantasy rhythm game on, I believe, the 3DS.
3DS,
That was
yeah.
a weird, unexpected game, but a really fun rhythm game. And so I'm hoping this is kind of in that vein. But in true Kingdom Hearts fashion, it also looks like it has extremely important plot points that if you care about the ongoing story, you need to play this. So
It's part of the
canon.
saga.
yeah,
It's a
it
rich
is.
tapestry.
It looks like there is new canon being introduced in what you would think would just be a rhythm game, but it seems to actually play into some heavy stuff. Yeah.
But,
Is
I love
but to
is
it.
there? Go ahead.
I love it in that I hate it.
to what Matt said too, I think it's easy to get caught up in stuff like Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy when you hear Square Enix, but like Square Enix is making Avengers, Square Enix did Life is Strange, right? Like Square Enix branches out a lot beyond just those kind of RPGs and Final Fantasy stuff. So like I'm sure that some of these like several new games is going to be stuff people are absolutely not expecting in any way, shape, or form, and it's just going to be sort of something different. And that doesn't mean like better or worse. It's just like there's going to be like it's not all going to be like Final Fantasy stuff.
Yeah,
Right.
there was a while back, especially when the Avengers project was announced. It was announced specifically as the first game in a multi-project collaboration between Marvel and Square, and we have not heard a single other thing about a second game. And granted, Avengers has been ongoing for a while. That game was revealed with a teaser in 2017, I think. So it's been a while for this one game. But there were rumors, I want to say maybe 2 years ago, of Eidos, who was, I believe, collaborating with Crystal on some development for Marvel's Avengers. Essentially, that Eidos was allegedly, and according to some reports, working on possibly another Marvel game. So it's possible they may have another project in development or in the works that could be something we see from them soon.
Yeah, Tom's point is very well taken. Like they also put out Just Cause 4, they put out Shadow of the Tomb Raider. So I sort of steered us towards Final Fantasy, but that's my limited knowledge. It could be a bunch of different things. They put out Hitman. So
It's diverse.
yeah,
Square Enix is diverse.
it'll be great to see what comes from that. Yeah. Okay, but we don't know anything yet other than that games will be coming. So let's move on to a sadder story. Sad for, I don't know, the economy. It's abstract to me, but it's sad in tone for a chat show. Microsoft is closing all but 4 of their physical locations. First of all, I think we should address the elephant no longer in the room. Non-Week says, I think the bigger news is Microsoft had Microsoft stores. Now, I remember them. I saw them in malls around me. How about panel? Were you aware of Microsoft stores? Have you spent much time in one before this news hit?
I mean,
There's
I knew
one
they
in the-
existed.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've
Yeah,
never been inside
yeah.
one.
I've been in there's one in the mall near my house, and like I went there a fair number of times because it's to their credit, man, like as much as retail stores are there to sell you stuff, it was a nice little experience. They had a lot of games on display, they had a lot of computers on display, and they were one of the only stores when VR was just sort of coming up to like have VR in a public place testable for people. So like I always appreciated that a lot.
That's very cool. Yeah, when I was a kid, it was Best Buy had like a Sega Saturn in a glass case that you could try out. VR is great. For me, the Microsoft Store was very much one of those mall stores where you go in and try stuff out. And I assumed that the goal was to get you to go home and buy a Microsoft product, not necessarily buy it there, because I never did.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but maybe that's part of the problem. However, on the bright side, they've announced that this will cause no layoffs, and they are keeping 4 physical locations in London, New York City, Sydney, and Redmond, which will be reimagined as Microsoft Experience Centers, which I got to say reminds me a lot of sort of what GameStop was sort of pivoting toward before the pandemic sort of threw a monkey wrench in everyone's plans. Do you guys see that comparison? Am I crazy here? And I wonder if we have any thoughts on if this is a good direction for them to head in.
I mean, go ahead.
I mean, clearly it's the direction they have to head in. I think whether it's good or not, to a certain extent, they just like apparently they're in a position where they need to pivot, and so they're pivoting. Is what it sounds like to me, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jonathan, were you going to say something similar?
I was going to say it definitely sounds like GameStop, but maybe it's always going to happen on any stream. Also, I think even more so Toys R Us, because GameStop still has a pretty decent number of stores open, whereas Toys R Us was one of those things where it closed completely, and then they were like, we're trying 2 incubator stores in like New Jersey and Plano, Texas, and we're going to see if these more experiential environments work for what our stores can do. And that sounds like what they're doing with these stores. I like that they are saying there will be no layoffs, but I don't know what that translates to. Like, obviously with shelter in place right now, a lot of people are working remotely, and so maybe these people can transition to remote work jobs. But I don't know if this is one of those weird technicalities where they're like, there won't be layoffs, but we will need people to either relocate or find other work. Like, I don't know the specifics of how deep that part goes.
Right.
I mean, I like the idea of a showroom, for
I was gonna,
any company.
yeah, go ahead.
Like, I know, I mean, they've got the Xbox Series X coming out, but also beyond that, they also have these cool full-screen foldable laptop things that they announced a year ago. That's like one screen that just folds in half, and I'd love to like get my hands on with one, even if I, just to check it out. And I think a lot of these tech companies do well with showroom floors.
And we're living through the rise of VR, as Tom pointed out. I do think there actually is a market for experiential stuff. VR arcades are kind of taking that and crystallizing it into its own like event you go do. But at the same time, I guess I wonder if it's sustainable. It feels like a Hail Mary, I think a lot of people feel. But it seems like a showroom should exist. A place where you can go try the thing out is valuable. But if there's only 4 in the world, I question what it is then. Because the whole point of a showroom where you could go try it out was that they were in every mall, right?
Yeah. No, you're totally right. And I think to that end, it actually reminds me less of like a GameStop experiential thing and more of like a Nintendo store type thing, where like Nintendo could have Nintendo stores in every city, every mall selling Nintendo toys, right? But instead they have like one in New York. They've got like one here, one there, like a couple, right? And as a result, them, like they are things that Nintendo fans need to, when you're in New York, you want to go to the Nintendo store. And like that might be the way they're going with this instead, is like, here's this like pinnacle of a thing of like, if you are a fan of this brand or of these products, when you're in town, go to this place and get some things that maybe you could only get there. Like that's maybe the direction they're going for instead, is breed like excitement out of scarcity in that these stores are now something more special.
Aspirational brand awareness. Sure, I can see that. Does
Yeah, it's
anyone
all
know
that
where?
hurt me.
Oh, go
That
ahead,
hurt me.
Jonathan.
I was also going to say, yeah, like I agree with Tom that it puts people in a place where if you're visiting, obviously they're doing it in major cities and also where Microsoft is located in the US with Redmond. But it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I'm
Okay.
in that city. I want to go check out this environment. But it's also one of those funny things of it's probably okay to keep those stores up even if they're not constantly selling product. Because like you're saying, Swim, it may encourage people to go home and buy things. And also, the real estate for 4 stores is probably tremendously cheaper than having to worry about all these stores in expensive malls and expensive cities and locations.
Yeah, malls are something that I wonder if, I mean, they've been beleaguered for a long time, but I wonder if the pandemic will sort of kill malls. I don't know, as a thing. Yeah, anyway, that's deep. That's for another podcast.
Man, that got
Uh,
sad real quick.
I know. I hope not. Where will all
yeah,
the mall foods
there's
go?
exactly.
Yeah.
There's so many subcultures that exist in the petri dish of the mall. Can that all just
Yeah.
fade away?
There will never
And
be a new generation of Avril Lavigne's without malls.
If it
and
means that
thank
I can
you.
get pretzel bites like without having to go to the mall, if I can get Wetzel's pretzels outside of a mall, I'm okay with malls dying.
Yeah,
You
what's
can
even the
3D
point
print that. Yeah.
there?
I thank you, Jonathan, for bringing up the Redmond thing because I did not understand. The odd one out
Oh
was
yeah,
why is there one in Redmond? Okay, great. Let's move on to our next story. Another bright spot because I had no idea this was in the cards. Sort of like I won't ask people to speak on this because we didn't prep it, but there's a Disco Elysium show in the works. It's like
Yes.
treats I didn't know I was gonna get, but Cuphead has a new Netflix series, and they released a trailer today, which I'm sure our producer's going to be cutting to shortly. And it was sort of a behind-the-scenes thing because it looks like it's just sort of coming together. But yeah, any Cuphead fans on the panel besides myself? I love that game.
Yeah, Cuphead's great.
Yeah, fun
It's
game.
it's. I mean, I'm just excited that they released this trailer because like it sounds like a no-brainer when you say you're going to make a Cuphead animated show, right? But Cuphead also like one of the whole reasons that game is incredible is because of its animation style. And so like if you screw that up, it's not going to be a good show. And this trailer didn't look like it screwed it up. It looked really cool. So I'm into
It
that.
and it seemed to accomplish something very difficult, which is that the designs don't literally look exactly like the game. They
Yeah.
did slightly design it up, and yet it didn't feel like it broke the feel of it at all to me. And of course, they have a rich well to go to with Fleischer cartoons. They said specifically, if you're too young to know, that's like Betty Boop and the early Superman cartoons. I did like there was a comment on IGN though. Where was it? Dennis73 says, it's going to bring us back to our childhood. How old do they think we are? Because Fleischer cartoons are like, we're talking the 30s and 40s. So I think the animation style will bring you back to before you were born, frankly.
it's
But
bringing
cool.
you back to someone's childhood.
Someone's childhood. Not
Your
even the
grandfather's
people
childhood.
working on this project. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Cuphead, though, I will say, had an overly simplistic plot, and I wonder in the age of Adventure Time and other like kids animated shows where the plot actually gets pretty intricate and lore heavy. I wonder if they'll go lore heavy or they will be very, very basic stories like
Oh,
like the plot of Cuphead.
I totally think they'll go super lore heavy, which I'm very excited for because they have essentially the framework of what they could do with like they have the character designs, they have a general idea of the world, they have these like basics, but they're not too beholden to anything that's in the game because it is so much more of a generalized story. So they can really dig deep when they start doing hopefully multiple seasons if it's a good show. And I would say like I really trust Netflix to give it its due because I do think they've had a pretty great track record when it comes to animated series, whether it's the Voltron series I know is really beloved. I love the She-Ra series. The Castlevania series is great. Like they have a great track record with animated shows and giving them the time and the seasons they need. So I totally think they could go pretty deep with this.
Yeah,
and
we should note it's not. Go ahead. Sorry.
I think we were going to say the same thing. They explicitly said it's not the plot of the game, right?
Yeah,
It's a brand new thing.
And it's not even MDHR, the creators of the game, although I'm sure there's some level of communication and involvement, but I have no verification on that. Yeah, nevertheless, I echo what Jonathan said. I just think I trust Netflix seems like a space where they try to not spoil the golden goose, not spoil the thing that they know is already working, which I praise them for. Matt, any thoughts on Cuphead, the animated series?
I did not beat Cuphead. It's a very tough game.
It's
I look for.
hard.
I imagine the Netflix series will be easier to get through than the game, so that's a plus, with my opinion.
I would love it if the series you had to really rapidly like click your Roku remote or it booted you to the
Mhm.
beginning over and over
Yeah,
again.
like you
Chugger.
messed up.
It's
Yeah.
constantly
So
bumping, but yeah.
Yeah. There will
that's
definitely
one
be
upside.
there will definitely be at least a bit about how difficult the show is, or you know what I mean?
Mm.
They'll weave
Yeah.
some reference in, I'm sure. Yeah. Okay. We're racing through and I don't want to run out, but I am going to move us
Well, then,
on because I was looking at the B-roll. Oh, unless you have more Cuphead thoughts.
I was
Here's
just
my
gonna say
okay.
you brought up Disco Elysium, man, and then it
Yeah,
was just
come on.
Oh, let's talk about that a little bit. But
Yeah.
I did just want to say the B-roll that you were seeing, it looks like we just got Cuphead game footage, which is fine. No shade thrown at our producers, but you can find that Cuphead behind the scenes trailer on IGN. They introduce you to the voice cast. It's pretty neat. But anyway, yeah, Disco Elysium. I just saw
Yeah.
that as a Zaum. Is that how you say that company's name? Tweet, I think. But apparently, it's going to be a TV series.
Yep.
Great.
I'm
That's
sad it's not David Fincher or like some
Yeah.
weird like
Yeah.
like I want the weirdest possible thing out of a
Mhm.
Disco Elysium TV show.
Yeah, let's go around the horn. Everyone's ideal. I want a Darren Aronofsky.
Yeah, that'd be cute.
Jonathan, any
So-
particular relationship to Disco Elysium?
I haven't played it yet because I'm waiting for the console
Okay.
release. But as soon as Tom said Fincher, I was like, oh yeah, Fincher makes sense for what I know of the game.
I could see that. It's very pulpy. Soderbergh would work too. Matt,
Ooh,
did
yeah.
you disco?
I think a lot of focus is being put on how like a cerebral game Disco Elysium is, but it's also deeply funny. I think a good comedy team could knock it out of the park with the Disco Elysium game. I don't know who, but I don't know, Dan Harmon maybe, but I
Mhm.
think a funny meta comedy team would work wonders with that property.
And then
Yeah.
all we know right now is that it's the producer of the Sonic movie, right? I think.
Yeah, I mean he's a producer on a lot of things, but yeah, he produced the live-action Sonic the Hedgehog movie, and his production company, DJ Two Meat Entertainment, has or is partnering with Zaum on this project, and apparently they're working on a Sleepy Dogs adaptation as well, which I didn't even hear about. So, like they've got one for Sleeping Dogs and Disco Elysium, I guess.
I do feel like this happens a lot with game adaptations. I feel like I've heard a lot of things be like, yeah, we're making an adaptation. There's no network or writer
Hmm.
or anything attached, but we'll get there one day.
Yep. Yep.
So I know how beloved this story is and this game is, so I do hope it happens. But yeah, it's one of those like they don't have a network yet, and they don't have I think like a showrunner or anything. So it's probably a bit far off, at least for now.
Yeah.
Definitely could get caught in production limbo. Who knows? I do hope that the producer of Sonic the Hedgehog movie understands that this is a very different video game than Sonic the Hedgehog. It needs to be
Is it?
adapted very differently.
That
But
man is a video game expert.
yeah, I also wonder. Does anyone feel, or the doubt in my heart comes from that game is almost like a character study in you because it builds the character of you as you answer your own personality questions. It's almost like Calvin and Hobbes famously never got adapted because Bill Watterson, the creator, said I don't want kids to hear Hobbes's voice because it would define it rather than. I wonder if the detective could be defined or there's any actor that could embody him without me. I mean, Hopper from Stranger Things comes to mind immediately, but you know what I mean. Do you think there's an issue with that game being about a nebulous character?
Well, not just that. I think it's one of those moments where this is not throwing shade at the story of Disco Elysium, which is great, but like the thing that made Disco Elysium such a breakout success and so impressive is not necessarily something that can translate to a TV show or a movie or anything like or another medium, right? Because what it did was it wasn't just like here's a really good story in a world, even though it had a really good story in a really good world, which is, I think, what the TV show needs to really mine to be successful. But like you said, a lot of what made that game really impressive was, there's not really combat. You're instead just sort of making these very cerebral choices that are, influencing your character in the way you think and reflect you in a little bit of a sense, or maybe don't. And like the way it messes with you as a player and sort of, I hate this phrase, but subverts your expectations in terms of like what a traditional isometric RPG should be or will be. And like, yeah, I don't think that translates to TV, but I also think that the world they have is so cool that they could make a successful TV show set in it without needing that stuff. And just like, as long as they make sure that they're making it for a different medium rather than just trying to take the game and plop it into a TV show.
That's true. The world is very unique and compelling in its own right.
Yeah. Which is why I
Anyone
think
else
comedy is kind of the way to go, because it's
Yeah.
not an action game.
Sure.
There's no combat in that game. It's all words and inner monologues and stuff like that, and dialogue exchanges, and that's why I think, like, if you're gonna adapt that into a show that people will enjoy, focus on what it's about, which is the words, and make them fun and creative.
Yeah, you could really easily make a very uninteresting Disco Elysium TV show that's just like a cop show, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you just made like a standard detective noir show with that world, it would not be very compelling, right?
Snowpiercer TV show.
There you go.
They turned that into a pop show. It's nuts.
It's got to
So
truly
weird.
subvert the medium in some way, because that's what Disco Elysium did. So it has to genuinely be odd, or the structure has to be wonky or something, I think.
On a TV sort of track mind, since you guys know the game, would Brian Fuller be a good choice for it? Because I'm just thinking sort of in the mode of Hannibal, and like he's good at balancing sort of procedural and serial storytelling, but also getting weird and strange with the format.
Yeah,
he's a good genre bender.
Yeah, and he also proved with stuff like Pushing Daisies that he can do funny moments in dark situations, which is what that game is good at.
Yeah, anyone who's inherently a little bit unsettling also, like a younger Jeff Bridges would work. Or where you think they might get drunk and take a swing at you, but otherwise they're a good guy, Me.
I don't know. Hopper kind of feels like a good casting, like perfect casting.
Yeah.
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 All right. Speaking of shows and creative, fun words, HBO Max is not going to run 5 South Park episodes, and as far as I can tell, that's because of the depiction of the Prophet Muhammad. In every case, I don't think it's about swearing. So it's the controversial episodes Super Best Friends and Cartoon Wars, which, if you follow South Park, you must be aware of those ones. They were big event episodes at the time. At the time, they were hugely controversial. Trey Parker and Matt Stone spoke up at the time, of course, against censorship. But HBO Max has decided that they're not going to include them in the South Park package, although all the rest of South Park is coming to HBO Max. I hesitate to put anyone on the spot because, as journalists or journalist-adjacent people, we all have complicated relationships with censorship, free speech, and like strong feelings. And it's a live show. I don't want to hang anyone out to dry. But thoughts on the censorship of these 5 South Park episodes?
I will throw myself on the hand grenade just to start this conversation off, which is completely devoid of my own opinion in this matter. Something that I think is worth pointing out is that this isn't like the first time this has ever happened, right? These episodes have been censored by Comedy Central for a very, very long time. They, I believe, haven't been streaming on other streaming platforms. Whenever South Park comes to other streaming platforms, these episodes are also censored. Or not available, or what have you, right? Like they're limited in like essentially what was already happening to South Park elsewhere is still happening to South Park on HBO Max is like the right way to look at this. And again, this is not me like saying it should happen or it shouldn't happen or any of that. It's just like this is not new for South Park in a streaming environment, I guess, or even on TV.
And it's there was recently similar news. Tina Fey voluntarily, I think, is asking that 30 Rock episodes that featured blackface be omitted from all
Right.
future like airings of that
Yeah.
show. So it is. I mean, like to not talk around it too much. We're in an era of things getting shifted, priorities being reevaluated, and some people have various takes on that. But we're seeing now pop culture sort of roll with that and morph to accommodate that. Ultimately, that is a personal question that I don't think we have the answer to. So I'm not going to ask any of us to like answer that societal question. But you know, we report on pop culture, and this is now happening in the case of 30 Rock and South Park. So you can discuss your thoughts on that in the comments. Keep it civil, people.
I will say this. Sorry.
Yeah, please, Matt. Exactly. I was hoping
The
someone would chime in.
I will say this. Just reading this story because it's not just one episode. It's like 5 episodes
Right.
that are all featuring the Prophet Muhammad. Matt and Trey seem to have some sort of like career goal to get Muhammad on TV. Like they've tried on 5 separate occasions to do it, and it
Yeah.
just seems like they're really. I don't know. I don't know why they keep trying. Like they want to really badly. It seems. And
That the funny thing is historically, like they succeeded the first time. Like this is the interesting thing about South Park and these episodes specifically is the first one. What was it called? Super Best Friends. That went out pretty much without controversy, right? Like there wasn't really an issue. Nobody. I mean, I'm sure there were people in the world upset, but like it wasn't this big deal. And it wasn't until they did the Cartoon Wars episodes that was like specifically about this that people started to get like pay attention, I guess is the right way to put it. And then they actually went back, Cartoon Network went back and censored Super Best Friends after the Cartoon Wars episode. So like they did show him on Cartoon Network or on and like
Comedy Central.
Comedy Central, yeah. They ran it. Yeah, they ran it. And their quote was, I'm like, sorry, I'm not scrolling to the quote as fast as I'd like to, but essentially something about how like we expected it essentially to get aired once and probably never again. And to Matt's point, I think South Park, it dips into different comedy buckets, but one is, right, the crappy anti-establishment teenager who's going to do the opposite of whatever you say society's rules are, and it is a sign of disrespect to depict the Prophet Muhammad, so they're going to do it. They think it's funny because you told them not to. I think that's pretty clearly just like part of South Park's ethos, whether you like that or not. Okay, I'm going to move us on unless someone wants to get a word in edgewise. All right. So this is a story I think we can spend a fair bit of time on because I'm a big Diablo fan, and Diablo 4 is taking a minute. But we have some Diablo 4 gameplay details. There was a recent playtest which took place in the game's Dry Steppes area, which we saw at the BlizzCon 2019 reveal. And after the playtest period, a report came out, and we're sort of starting to have details trickle in about the ways in which the Diablo formula has evolved. And I'll say personally, I was surprised it evolved so much because Diablo tends to stay very within its lane. And there's some interesting twists. I don't want to hog all the juicy information. Matt, are you up on the Diablo twists? You want to take this one?
I actually played it last year at BlizzCon.
Oh, wow. Perfect.
Yeah.
Do you see how I nailed that pass? Go for it.
That was wild. I think I was going to say a note about it, but yeah, no, I played it last year, and I thought it was super early, so I only played this one. I think it was the steppe area. I don't know what it's called, but it's like this dark, grimy village area. Played as a sorceress. It was very cool. The stories were sad, which I really liked. I like sad stories in dark fantasy games, and it was very much one of those like, you must do this quest, but at every twist and turn the quest just gets darker and darker, and you're forced to make some sacrifices kind of thing, which I thought was very cool on the offset. But it's very much like the Diablo games that you remember, just much prettier. And
although
expansive.
there's new activity types, right? I mean, I know there are.
I didn't encounter those. My demo is very classic. Was very much to the formula. Yeah, I think whatever updates they've made since previewing the game at BlizzCon last year are all new and haven't been demoed externally from the studio. My gameplay slice was very much like a, hey, you remember Diablo? This is the Diablo you like. This is it. Here it is. And I'm like, yes, this is exactly what I remember, and I like this.
And they've said there still is a very traditional Diablo linear story campaign, but it is leaning open world in some ways, which I think is really interesting. So side activities that I guess, Matt, maybe didn't exist in your playtest, or you just didn't have enough time to meander. Let's see. Side activities included crafting, world events, PvP, side quests, and camps, which is not new to gaming. I mean, it's very Far Cry-esque, but it'll feel very different, I think, in the Diablo context, which are these camps of, you know, hordes of enemies that if you can actually finally win the day, it becomes a waypoint, like a safe spot on your map where NPCs start to populate and can provide, presumably, shop services, things like that. I'm just excited to see. I would always be excited for a new Diablo game, but I do think after 3 Diablo games that I've played multiple times at this point, I'm welcoming any kind of side quest aspect or activity loop change. Tom, what is your Diablo track record?
I really liked 3 for a bit, but then just sort of like, you know, just fell off naturally. Not like I wasn't one of the people who like went through all of the terror levels and made myself hate my life and got really into the hard difficulties and all that jazz. But I liked 3 once it sort of like got the kick in the pants it needed, if that makes sense. You know, like that game started out pretty rough and evolved into something that I think we now, most people would agree is pretty great. Yeah, I'm more than anything just sort of like surprised that they're talking about Diablo 4 in this way. Like even beyond the features and the differences, like it's a little out of character for Blizzard to be like, hey, we did a closed test that we didn't show anyone. Here's what we discovered about the game as a result. Like that's much more open than they've been, especially about Diablo 4, where it was this question of like, when are they going to even announce it? Are they even still working on it? Because it reportedly went through all these changes where it was like almost an action RPG or not action RPG, sorry, like an action like brawler game and like all this stuff. So I'm more than anything like all this stuff could change, right? Of like the specifics of it, but I'm just encouraged by the fact that they're just talking about it more openly. That's really cool to me.
Blizzard also don't shy away from canceling a game if they think it's not panning out, I think.
Right.
They've proven. Yeah. Jonathan, do you have Diablo in your veins? Do you have Brimstone in there?
I don't. Every time it's on sale on the PlayStation Network, I go, maybe I should finally buy this, and then I keep forgetting to after the sale ends. I've just,
gotta, man.
I never had a PC, so like Diablo was just a franchise that escaped me earlier on, and I've always looked at 3 and been like, I should play it, and then 100 things come up for work, and then I don't play it. But from what I've seen of 4, I want to play. Like I am like, maybe I should finally get into this franchise.
The simple act of clicking has never been so fun. You will click so much, you'll click your mouse broken.
Fun fact, Jonathan does all of his IGN work on his PS4. It's very impressive.
It's true. Yeah. that browser's awful, but I
typing your articles? Amazing.
Touchpad.
He does it all.
And,
yeah, you don't use the like gyro typing? That's not how you go?
No. I'm not that much of an expert.
Oh, the pointer? Yeah. They also talked about it will be a shared world, shared server, handled a little differently than past installments, and some concerns came up with that about it becoming overcrowded, but I do like that they do cleave close to their formula, or at least the feel of the game. I think it's going to be more like Bloodborne, where you feel that it's a shared world, but things don't necessarily clutter up your game constantly. Right. Or at least they've said they're fine-tuning it with that goal in mind, that you're not going to constantly run into people in every Diablo dungeon. It's more like areas where you'd expect there to be a bunch of people. I'm presuming that means towns and hubs. You'll see other players. Yeah.
Actually, that happened in my demo. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, that was one of the things in the demo. Is it's true. Like, you do run into other players that are playing on a similar network, but it was mostly just overlaps in the big open areas. And once I got into like dungeons proper, I never encountered another player unless at all. So that's a good
Mhm.
sign, I think, that they're on the right path for whatever they're looking at
Yeah.
ideally.
I'm a
Yeah,
big
and
single player. Go ahead, Tom, please.
I was going to ask you specifically, Swaim,
Hmm.
is like if you seem to be the biggest Diablo head amongst us, and like, does that like concern you? Like, are you worried about this idea that they're adding? They said explicitly it's not going to be like they don't want it to feel like an MMO, but they are adding MMO ish elements. Like, is that weird?
It's a bit weird just because Diablo appeals very much to me because it seems to cater to the single player experience. I am very single player, ride or die. I played games because I'm introverted. I don't want extra social interaction. Um, so, oh, unless it's co-op, I like the fake idea that we're all friends and we're all trying together. But I don't even. I'm not aware of PvP having existed in Diablo 2 or 3, but it might. It's crazy because I've logged hundreds of hours in each Diablo. I don't know if the previous iterations have PvP, but this one does, and I will admit that seems odd to me that I would just like click as fast as I can on my abilities and on someone else, and they're clicking as fast as they can on me, and we just see how that pans out. That feels like an odd experience to me. It's not why I go to Diablo at all. I go to Diablo for the world and the loot drop experience, the sheer randomization of not just the loot that drops, but the name of the loot and the names of the enemies, like Thunderface Tree Hands and stuff like that. It's basically a monster name generator. That's what Diablo is. It's great.
Yeah,
I'm
except
very interested in crafting because the fact that they highlight crafting of a sort already existed where you could fine tune the tags on all your items, like what kind of buffs they would do to like minute detail. So if they say, no, 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 there's a new crafting system, I really am curious about what will we be crafting? What do you mean? What does that look like? As much as I have in the past thrown shade at Ubisoft, I never know, for the camp system and every game having the camps and the beacons. I got to admit it blends well with Diablo. I'm looking forward to knocking out camps and feeling that little sense of one more thing on my to-do list is checked off. Flag
Mhm.
rises, I like those.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
I like open worlds where you can permanently influence the world as well. Like not just like the best example of it is if you climb a tower in an Assassin's Creed game, and I know they've moved away from that in the more recent Assassin's Creed games, but like you climb a tower and you observe an area, it doesn't actually like change that area. It just changes how you explore that area. Whereas like the Far Cry games having those camps that you can clear them out and like suddenly that is a permanent thing that you have a piece of ownership on like you've changed
Hmm.
this world a little bit is super super rewarding. I'm totally on board for seeing that. I'm also really glad with the MMO stuff that they like the way they're talking about it. This remains to be seen, right? Like when we actually play it, but like the way they're
Hmm.
talking about it of like you'll see other people but it won't feel like an online game feels like the right direction to me. Like I like the idea of go out into the world and play Diablo like normal, but then when you like get to a town, there's just some other people there and it doesn't really like you don't have to wait for connections and that sort of thing. It's just like, oh yeah, there's just some people, cool, and then you leave and you go along your way, right? That's like a neat little fantasy to me if
Yeah,
they can pull it off.
I'm also really excited with just the two-word phrase public events because that implies to me, having like played a lot of Destiny, that you could, rally to a flag and a random story beat will drop into the world and everyone has to scramble and co-op it
Right.
at once. That sounds really cool to me and a very natural fit for the Diablo world. So I'm excited about that. Yeah. Any last Diablo thoughts before we move on to our final story?
In that, I hope they continue with these little surprise news blog development updates. I think Diablo in particular, the messaging has to be 100% because, as you know, there was that controversy a couple years ago where the messaging for Diablo was very confusing and not 100%, and it kind of made the internet mad. So I feel like Blizzard is
Yeah.
aware of that and is gonna only be dropping meaningful updates that pertain specifically to Diablo 4 going forward.
Yeah, you don't want to make the internet mad, but I also feel Blizzard is one of the companies where if they make the internet mad, the internet is still going to silently buy the game. As we talked about a bit at the top of the show. My favorite tweet about Last of Us was like pictured all the people complaining about the plot going to buy the game at GameStop with like their hood down. Give me The Last of Us, please. Okay, but our final story, I don't have details in front of me because it just broke, I think, shortly before we started putting the show doc together. But Margot Robbie cast in a Pirates of the Caribbean spin-off movie series. Someone take the ball from me. Matt, what do we know?
Okay. Jonathan,
what do we know?
Tell you, I know quite a bit as our resident, I guess, Pirates aficionado. There was a report from THR that Margot Robbie is set to star in a new Pirates of the Caribbean movie written by Christina Hodson, who wrote Birds of Prey. She's apparently set to write this with Robbie to star, but there's been no director or any plot details. But it's supposed to be completely separate from the old Jack Sparrow starring movies, so it's not related to that. And it's also it's a wholly original story with new characters under the Pirates moniker, and is also said to be separate from the already announced reboot, which is supposed to be written by Ted Elliott and Craig Mazin, who wrote Chernobyl and is also set to write the Last of Us TV show for HBO. But otherwise, there's no info about what the story would be.
Well, that's a lot of info for no info. Mazin is everywhere. Also,
he's everywhere.
Yeah,
he's hot. People want
Mazin can
words.
do whatever he wants.
Mazin's
That's true.
in right now.
Yeah.
Chernobyl. I
That
think
Mazin
Last of
is
Us.
so hot.
It's in good hands. Yeah. I didn't know even about the reboot, so that's quite a lot of Pirates shenanigans going on. But Margot definitely gives it a renewed interest for me that I wouldn't have had otherwise. How about you guys?
I want to see Margot Robbie as a pirate.
I mean, I'm down for that. I just don't like fundamentally understand how this franchise became such a popular thing. Like I understand the originals because the original movie is phenomenal, and then like as far as I saw it, they made two like middling to okay sequels, and then they just never stopped making movies, and I don't understand how that works at all.
It's got some Transformers vibe to it, yeah.
Right, it's
foreign
and clearly making their money back, and I just don't understand how or why.
So yeah, 4 and 5 definitely went off the rails. 4 still made, though, on Stranger Tides, was still made over $1 billion worldwide. Like the Pirates franchise is so big overseas, even as its star kind of fell down in North America. It was so big in international markets that I think for Disney it was just like a no-brainer, keep this thing going, even if the movies were not good. And I think there is still such a beloved, like that first movie that is one of my favorite like modern day blockbusters. I think it is so great. And even though the second and third don't live up to it, I think there's still a lot of love for them because at moments they captured the brilliance of that original one. And there's like this fun ingenuity to it. And there is so little like pirate based storytelling on a big budget scale like that. And so I think we know that there is potential in this franchise because it's especially now not beholden to anything other than the original ride. There's so much potential that I think the right story and the right writer and the right cast could equal a still fantastic Pirates movie.
Yeah, because it's almost fully disjointed from the ride at this point, right? Like, who at this point is going to the movies thinking this is so faithful to that animatronic ride on the other side of the world? I think it's more producer Chris just whispered in my ear, people love pirates, baby. And I think it's that you have to have a zombie franchise that's dominant, a pirate franchise, a ninja franchise, and a Western franchise. And for better or worse, Pirates of the Caribbean is our Pirates right now. I think it's telling that we just call it Pirates. You know, Pirates.
My favorite thing is like the world building is so weird, right? Like here's an animatronic ride about pirates, and Pirates of the Caribbean was like, what if the zombie pirates? And people were like,
what if
yes.
when the moonlight touches them, they
become skeletons? They're like, okay, I'm in. And then like for a sequel, they're like, all right, second idea. They're like, what? Pirate government and an octopus man, and they're like,
Somebody
I'm in.
somebody call the Rolling Stones. Why? You'll
Yeah,
see. You'll see.
you'll see. I got all these ideas. I got all these pirate ideas. You don't even know.
I think, like, for me though, it also, and this is not attributing any of its success to this, but for me, it also represents like a weirder side of Disney that we haven't gotten in so long because of how corporate and like mega company they've gotten. Because like this was a early 2000s blockbuster directed by Gore Verbinski based on a Disney theme park ride, and like it became one of the biggest movie franchises of the 2000s. Like that first trilogy was at the top of the charts until Marvel took over everything. Like they were such big movies. So for me, there's also this hope that like maybe it's still somehow someone's going to get a really weird inventive movie out of Disney
Yeah.
under the guises of this big corporate machine.
And I
Yeah,
know it's over. Go ahead, Tom, please.
I was gonna say I'm not hating on the idea of them making more as long as they're rebooting it. Like that's
Oh yeah,
that's fine.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I think
Yeah.
that's the way the series, what the series would need if they want it to keep being interesting to a wide audience. But apparently, it'll just make money no matter what. So I just shut.
Speaking of making money, no matter what, thanks to everyone who's given to our two great causes, the World Health Organization's COVID-19 Response Fund and the
Very
Bail
good.
Project. We've raised over $35,400. But that boilerplate tone you hear in my voice means we're about out of time. I want to thank Tom, Matt, and Jonathan so much for being here. I don't know where that cute dog went, but I'm going to go look for it now.
He's asleep.
See you guys
He's
next week on News, Games, and More.